Is the right wing funnier than the left wing now? Is the right wing even funny at all? Well, let's talk about it. We got two experts here who think that maybe they are. I partly agree, partly massively disagree. So it'll be a fun conversation. Matt Sienkiewicz is associate professor at Boston College, and Nick Marx is associate professor at Colorado State University. And they have a book out called "That's Not Funny: How the Right Makes Comedy Work for Them." So welcome to both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
No problem. So before we get to the agreement, let's start with the fun disagreement. I'm going to challenge you guys to name one, not name, or say one funny joke from the right wing ever. My guess is you're not going to be able to do it, even though you wrote a whole book about it.
We don't disagree as much as you might think. We called the book "That's Not Funny" for multiple reasons, and certainly, to be clear, the book is definitely not making an effort to convince anyone, let alone progressive or liberal readers, that the right is funny. There are some characters we write about in this book who do create comedy that occasionally we appreciate, and do I want to retell any of their jokes? Probably not. But I mean, to be clear, our argument is sort of less trying to convince anybody that something is funny. We're liberals ourselves. We tend to want to be kind of possessive about comedy too. We could, I guess, talk about some of those examples that we do find a little bit less bad. But what we definitely want to argue is that the right uses comedy, and it uses it effectively to mobilize its coalition. Right? It's not going to make you laugh. It probably didn't make us laugh all that many times during the writing of the book. But we argue it's nonetheless a powerful force in American politics now, whether we find it funny or not.
Yeah, and that's where we're going to have the agreement. So I'm going to come back to that in a second. But Nick, you tell me. I mean, my sense of it is right-wing comedy is, look at them, they look different than us.
That's exactly right. It's less about the crafting of a joke that's got a setup and a punchline, and it's more about a collective ownership of the libs. The comedic strain that we outline in the book is one of uniting lots of different disparate right-wing voices, not necessarily under the same sort of right-wing ideology, although that's common, but it's in an ownership of the libs in order to achieve political outcomes, in order to recruit and attract younger, especially male adherents to right-wing causes. If you look at the listenership for a show like the Joe Rogan Experience, he's done very well in attracting that very lucrative demographic. Not always with the same sort of right-wing thought that you might find with something like the Babylon Bee or Gutfeld on Fox News.
Yeah, so look, a lot of the humor, it seems to me, can be categorized as trolling, which they're really good at. I'll give them credit for that, right?
Yep.
And they have mastered that art infinitely better than the left has, for the moment being. And the young left is rising, and we're pretty good at trolling too. I shouldn't put myself in the young category, but at least the left category. And a lot of the comedy is bullying, right? Like, they get a big kick, they get a laugh out of, hey, we Gamergate, we intimidated these women, and isn't it funny that they had to move their house because they were worried that we were going to rape them, because we're not really going to rape them, but we made them think that we were going to rape them. Isn't that hilarious, right? So, yeah, again, look, am I wrong about that? That seems to be the predominant strain of comedy in the right way.
So that is a big thing that we discuss in the book, and that is a major source. And I think that's probably the part of right-wing comedy that people more towards the left tend to be more familiar with. There's certainly that. I mean, we talk about that, extensively in the book. That piece is there, but as you, I think, noted in the question, it's hard to get. You don't want to give credit for such things. It can be done skillfully, if not sort of morally. It can be, sort of knowing the tropes of the internet, how to get people to react. That is a skill that's predominant on the right. There are other forms of comedy that we argue things that sort of seem irrelevant perhaps from the left, but sort of the world of old school hackneyed, we would call them sort of dull or outmoded comedians. We call them paleo comedians, people like Tim Allen and maybe Bill Burr, sort of moving in that direction. People who use comedy in different ways to express cultural conservatism, sort of harken back to a time where sort of only old white dads got to make the jokes. There's a range. I mean, we certainly acknowledge, and you're right. I mean, a good bit of what you would call sort of innovative, skillful comedy on the right comes in the form of these aggressive trolling maneuvers, done with more or less skill. There's other pieces there. There's a whole world that's just very into sort of, they sort of categorize it as free speech libertarianism, but it's really just an excuse to, say as many, offensive words as you can. I mean, we don't disagree. We would just say that there might be more range there than you're familiar with if you sort of aren't delving deeply into the subject.
Yeah, no, but actually, Matt, you just did it. You did actually name someone that I respect as a comedian, and that does sometimes do conservative humor, which is Bill Burr. So like Rogan and Bill Maher now do say a lot of conservative things, but they're not actually making a joke. They're just like, oh, we hate trans people, we hate Muslim people, isn't that funny? No, not really. I mean, just because you laugh afterwards doesn't make it funny. But Bill Burr does do actual comedy, and he's not necessarily conservative. I honestly have no idea what his political affiliation is, but I will see him make a conservative joke, and it's funny, right? So hey, we found it. Even if he's not conservative and I don't know what he is, right? At least he does do funny jokes. So credit where credit is due. But guys, let's get to the agreement now. And this is really, really important. It's not a light thing. It looks like the Republicans are having more fun now. And now that's different than being funny, but they don't mind being lighthearted. They don't mind joking around about serious stuff. Whereas the left has gotten really scared to joke about sensitive stuff or almost any stuff, right? Like, sure, still the overwhelming majority of comedians are on the left. Sure, they still have tons and tons of jokes and it's funny and etc. But there is definitely a little bit of recalcitrance, a pullback. And certainly on the political side, between Trump and Hillary Clinton, there was no question that Trump was having more fun. So is that something you guys have identified as actually affecting politics too?
Yeah, I think you've nailed it on the head with the Trump having more fun side of the equation. There's no doubt that he had the stage presence and the persona of an entertainer, right? The host of an extremely popular reality TV series. He knew how to do crowd work, how to turn members of the audience against other members of the audience. There was a timing and a rhythm to his delivery, going off of the teleprompter in the way that a comedian would sort of improvise. But the bigger point you're making is even more important, I think, and it's that the left is ceding ideological territory to the right in their self-censorship or in their lack of adventurousness in comedy today. Instead, what you see is the boundary pushing, even though it may end up in the avowed racism, sexism territories that you've identified, that boundary pushing is much more common on the right today than it is in the liberal comedy world. And we identify that in the book as a really dangerous area for potential developments, right? We cannot cede the ideological territory that we've held on to for the last 20 years.
Yeah, so Matt, I had somebody tell me once, it was actually on Ben Gleib's old TV show. Ben now does some shows with us from time to time. But anyways, I think it was one of his producers. They had a theory that whoever was funnier in a presidential contest would always win. And they took me through all the contests. I was like, oh, yeah, I can, yeah, that's not that bad a theory. And it's not necessarily because they're funnier. My thesis is that it's because it makes them more likable. Like they seem like more of a regular person instead of a corporate robotic politician. I will give you serious talking points. You must, give all the money to corporations. They are wonderful, right? Whether they're Republican or Democrat, that's boring and we hate it. Plus, it sucks. But is that the phenomenon you're seeing here? That Trump doesn't have to be like funny on purpose. He could be accidentally funny. But when he says things like, "Oh, Puerto Rico is surrounded by water, big water, ocean water," he's an idiot, so we laugh. It's like a Will Ferrell character, but at least people can relate to it, and it looks like he's having fun, whereas Hillary Clinton looks like a stiff, if I'm being real.
I mean, I think there's something to that, absolutely. You know, but politics is it's a party, right? It is a thing you join with other people. You know, communities need to be built. I think having a person who people, I don't know if it's relate to, but they can have fun with is a big advantage. I also think it's an advantage in political coalition building. One of the great things, or well, depends where you come from, could be a very bad thing, that comedy does is it can unite people who have different ideas, sort of in making fun of somebody else. Right, and this is one of the things that the Republican coalition has done such a great job on, right? To bad ends, and to my estimation. But taking people who have really different political beliefs, conservative Christians and these libertine, whatever we want to call Trump and his morality and all that, people who really shouldn't have much to do with each other, right? Who should disagree on almost everything. But they can agree on sort of having these jokes, right? Mocking the characters on the left they don't like, or just sort of engaging in this free-spirited, uninhibited space. And so I think there's a lot to this idea that if the head of a party invites people to put aside some of their specific differences and instead focus on making jokes about somebody else, or simply just sort of having fun together, I mean that's very powerful.
Yeah, we're out of time, but I don't want anybody to get me confused. Matt's right. I mean, I don't find Trump relatable at all. I can't relate to a guy who inherited $413 billion, bungled it away, and then blamed everyone else as a blithering moron and a hateful person. But yes, some people, just by his style, that don't agree with us necessarily, maybe independents, et cetera, find that more likable than a robotic politician, which is intensely unlikable. And I mean, I can't, anybody remember the last time Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi made a joke? Okay, I mean, God, what a collection of stiffs. So I think it's affecting the body politic in a lot of ways. I think your book shows that. One, by the way, maybe peeling off some independents, they need to win elections. But number two, as you just pointed out, Matt, unifying them, because the one thing that unifies the evangelicals, so-called family values, and the trolls and all of that is we don't like the others. So if you're making fun of the others, oh, okay, we like that. Now we're in. Screw family values. We're making fun of the others. They couldn't be happier, right? And so it's identity politics in the form of humor, and I always put that in quotes because it's really, again, as the title of your book is. That's not funny, but they like it, and it's certainly more lighthearted than what's happening on the other side. So the book is called "That's Not Funny: How the Right Makes Comedy Work for Them." Matt and Nick, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.